Every now and then a job comes into the workshop where there can be zero ambiguity. Now, this was a 750 and the rear left suspension was dropped to the floor, scraping along the ground. The guy didn't want any ambiguity.
So expensive.
I didn't want to order a £2 part and tell him that it still wasn't right. So we had to check the FlexRay system and basically make sure everything was okay before we ordered a new suspension leg. If you want to learn about FlexRay, this video is going to teach you that. Might be 6 minutes long, but stick around, it'll be worth it, promise you. So essentially, FlexRay is much faster than CAN bus, and it works in a slightly different way. Nowadays we have CAN FD. When this car came out, CAN FD didn't exist, so FlexRay was the order of the day. Because it's different than CAN, we have to diagnose it a different way. Here's a suspension leg, and it's a simple EDC system, electronic damper control, which consists of an hydraulic damper with some fancy valves which can control the bump and the rebound and the damping rate and everything. On top of that, we've got a standard air suspension bellow to give it a nice ride handling. So you get good ride handling, but you get a supple ride as well. So, how are we going to do it? Well, let's have a look. This is called EDC SHL, Adaptive Air Suspension Damper with Integrated Control Unit, left. It came with a check control message for suspension failure. No other description. So let's check the fault codes out. EDC SHL, Internal Control Unit fault. Tell you straight, usually there's water in it. It's old, it's over 10-year-old. It's knackered, simple as that. However, there was 2 other fault codes as well. And as you can see there, both signal invalid fault codes, which means the vertical dynamic management system computer isn't getting a signal from the rear left. We need to check the lines. Let's have a look in a little bit more detail. We've got actually some fault codes, and essentially these fault codes can be snapshotted. We've got the 98 times that this fault has occurred. So it's not really kind of sporadic, is it? I would say it's almost pretty much a permanent fault. Next step was to consult the old winding diagram and work out how it all works really. That's always the first things you do with fault finding. The suspension system on the 750 is really unusual in that each satellite damper, another term for adaptive suspension, is paired to the other one. So the rear left will be paired to the front left, and so on. For troubleshooting purposes, it's really important to understand the system runs on FlexRay, not CAN bus. Many people get that wrong. That means the rear left damper control unit in the damper contains a 95 ohm terminating resistor. The front left contains a 95 ohm terminating resistor also. So, as in CAN bus, if one of those resistors is open, the FlexRay signal will fail. Now, this also aids in troubleshooting, as we're going to see later on. One important point to remember is that the dampers pass through the gateway module, except the front right damper, which passes directly through the vertical dynamic management control unit. So, as is typical in Finland this time of the year, sort of when I did this job, winter time, I usually spend 10 minutes washing the thing off, because usually there's so much crap from the road that you can't get to anything. Now, the rear damper unit electronics is always really handy and it's always like enclosed in a little box, but we need to wash the salt off first before we can get to that. Once we get to that, the first thing I decided to do was to check the voltage supply in the ground, because, you know, a unit on a damper needs a power supply in the ground. If it ain't got that, that can also cause a signal to fail, and there'll definitely be no FlexRay, will there? As you can see, nothing wrong with that, 14.9 volts. Now, because the fault codes tended to refer to an internal control unit fault, which meant missing messages from that unit, from the damper, rear left, to the gateway module on the FlexRay bus, I found that the voltage was actually, and ground was okay, so the next thing to check was the FlexRay voltage. FlexRay is a bit like CAN, so it has a high and a low. 2 wires twisted pair. They're usually 2.5 volts each. Now, as you can see, there's nothing wrong with it. 2.48 is pretty much close enough. So we've got good FlexRay voltages, but have we got a good signal? Well, we'll check that pretty soon. So I wanted to make sure that the 12 volt and the ground had potential, and you've seen me voltage drop things and use load testing methods before in all my videos. So what I did on this, I did the same. I asked myself whether this wire is of sufficient condition to flow enough current to power up the EDC damper unit. Well, I used a 55 watt halogen bulb again. You all know I used them. And as you can see, it's pulling 4.5 amps and it's really good to load test the circuit. Didn't cost much money. It's a cheap bulb, but there you are. It's nice and bright. Nothing wrong with the wiring at all. So we've got good voltage, good load carrying capability, good ground, and 2.5 volts on each of the FlexRay lines. So that's pretty good, right? I also checked the terminating resistor on the FlexRay unit in case that was full of water or corroded. 95.8 ohms. It's pretty close to the 95 ohms you're going to find on each damper on the 7 Series vehicle. So everything's looking pretty good, right? So one other thing you should always remember when troubleshooting, it's never ever a bad idea to test female pins and connectors for tightness, because they can always spread and go open circuit. In this case, I popped some pins in, I give them a tug, made up a little mini test harness. They were nice and tight, they didn't fall out, so I didn't suspect any, sort of looseness or dick in the top, as we used to say in the old days in the 1990s. Time to break out the oscilloscope. Checked everything else. So a capture of the FlexRay signal was required. That would enable me to compare that with the rear right side, because there's nothing wrong with the rear right side. It works perfectly. FlexRay signal, I didn't have any libraries of that, so I wanted to compare it. So I took one from the right side and I took one from the left side. Now, as I've mentioned, if the dampers lose comms with each other, the bus will stop functioning on the path due to a loss of one or more terminating resistors. So we need to check that. So I whacked the old scope on with the fault code still on the car, and as you can see, there was nothing. It was dead. Zero. Nada. Nothing happening at all. So what I did then, I decided to erase the fault codes. And here we have from the same side, rear left, a good FlexRay signal. Now, it don't matter what the signal looks like. All you need to know is that signal there you can see on the screen is exactly the same as the right side, so I knew there was nothing wrong with it, because we don't have any fault codes to the right side. Yeah? Basically. Simple as that. We can tweak the scope to give way better resolution, but for the purposes of that test, that were more than adequate, because we're just comparing it. So if it looks the same, it's okay. So I wanted to make one more test just to make sure before I order this extremely expensive control unit. So I disconnected the front left damper. Nothing wrong with it, but I disconnected it to produce a fault on path 5 of the FlexRay unit, FlexRay bus. And that was the final proof that the data line integrity was in good shape, because comms were lost then from the front and left rear dampers. The original fault was control unit internal fault on the rear left damper. Testing like this, by inducing faults, can demonstrate the line is definitely good. Now, as you can see on this fault code list, it's a bit similar to the other one, but now it says ZGM FlexRay line fault on path 5. Because this particular damper runs through the gateway unit, the ZGM unit. The others go through the VDM. It don't matter about that. You don't need to worry about that. All I'm showing you is that if you want to induce a fault, to check that line, you can quite easily do it. Basically, it's very simple. So I fitted the new damper to it, coded it, because it needs to be coded, and the car was bang on. Of course, we set the ride out, checked the ride out after. It took me about an hour to do all that. And it's always good to spend an hour doing that, because if you don't and you get it wrong, who's going to pay for it? It's as simple as that. An happy customer, skills development, and a good reputation are what we all should strive for. It's as simple as that. Not too long a video, was it? I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed making it. For more videos like this, there's going to be a lot more coming. I'm busy, but I'm trying. Please follow me on TikTok. And please head over to my YouTube channel. Link is in the bio there, in my TikTok bio. And please subscribe to that and watch my videos on YouTube. TikTok's a fantastic platform. However, I can do much longer videos past the 10-minute limit on TikTok on my YouTube channel. And you'll be able to see a lot more content there on a regular basis. Thanks for the followers so far, guys and gals. Over 3,000 followers in 3.5 weeks since I started on TikTok. Thank you all. And thanks for watching. Comments below if you want any more things clarifying, I suppose.